Hi, third grade readers, it's Miss Puzio, and for today's student-facing video, I'm going to help you a little bit with figurative language in the passage When the Giant Stirred. So we are in Module 10, Lesson 5, and our focus question is, why is it important to pass stories down to the next generation? So if you have access to my book, make sure you're open to the passage, and if not, then try to make sure you have access to it online. So our lesson objective today is to explain the author's use of sound devices and imagery, and we're going to read out loud and investigate figurative language in When the Giant Stirred, and then you're going to read independently and try to notice any figurative language in the books that you are reading. So today you're going to finish reading When the Giant Stirred and investigate how the author makes the text interesting. So what are some ways we have learned that the author can make their writing more interesting? By using figurative language devices. Today as we read, we will pay close attention to how the author uses figurative language. So figurative language creates a special effect or feeling or makes a point. So sometimes authors don't want to say, oh, I was nervous, the character felt cold, the character was tired, the character was hungry. Authors want to make the writing more interesting, because when we read fiction passages, the author's purpose is usually to always entertain us, and we don't want to be bored when we're reading, and the author does not want us to be bored either. Okay, and the author wants to exaggerate or mean something different from what's expected. So what can the author do to make things more interesting? They can use figurative language, words or phrases to help us visualize and entertain us. So we're going to look at these charts to help us review and engage in some fun activities to help us understand a little bit more about figurative language. So let's take a look at this mini lesson. I think we all know who this character is, and we all know what this object is on the right. So let's take a little look here. And I want you to pause the video for a second. How do you think these two photos can be compared? And what I'm really asking you is, how are these two things similar? So pause for a minute and then come back to the video and tell me if you have an answer. So make sure to pause before you continue. So let's look at some sentence structures here, some sentence frames. Pikachu is blank blank the blank. Pikachu is blank 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 the blank. What are some words you think you could fill in here? If you can make some similarities between Pikachu and the sun, what would you say? Make sure you pause and come back. If you said Pikachu is yellow like the sun, or Pikachu is as yellow as the sun, you are correct. We could just say Pikachu is yellow, but if we wanted to make that a little bit more entertaining, we could say Pikachu is as yellow as the sun. Pikachu is yellow like the sun. That can tell the reader that Pikachu is so yellow, Pikachu is like the sun, and it makes it a little bit more entertaining. So what we just did right there was something called a simile. Okay, so figurative language are words and phrases in the story that we as readers have to figure out. Okay, and sometimes authors use literal words, things that we should be taken as we read it, right? And non-literal, things that we have to figure out, right? Things that should not be taken as we read it, and it has a different meaning, right? Pikachu really isn't the sun, but he's yellow like it. So again, just one more time. Figurative language is a word or phrase that does not have its normal meaning, and it's kind of used to have dramatic effect, right? And the authors use this to make the stories more interesting. And sometimes it can be confusing, but it makes it more fun. So sometimes we can confuse metaphors and similes. So what we just did with Pikachu was a simile. We compare two things using the words like or as, right? So Pikachu was yellow like the sun. Pikachu is as yellow as the sun. A metaphor doesn't use the word like or as. Pikachu is a yellow sun. A little bit stronger of a comparison, right? But he's literally not a yellow sun. We know that. Okay, then we have something called personification. And you'll notice inside this word, you see the word person. Okay, so this type of figurative language gives something that's not human, a human-like touch, right? Let's look at this example. The popcorn jumped out of the machine and made a mess all over the floor. Okay, so can popcorn really jump? Is popcorn like a person? No, right? But if you've ever seen popcorn before, it can kind of look like it's jumping, right? Or if we think the leaves danced in the wind, right? Leaves can't really dance, but that gives us some better imagery and we can visualize how leaves blow in the wind, right? So that's a little bit more entertaining than just saying the leaves blew in the wind. Then we have onomatopoeia. Those are sound words, right? Boom, pop, crash, the words that sound like what's actually happening. And it gives us, it appeals to the sense of hearing when we use it, and it brings a story or a poem to life in the reader's head, right? If something crashes down, screeches, crashes, booms, yells, pops, it helps us get into the story or the passage a little bit more. And then we have alliteration. This type of figurative language uses repeated sounds to bring emphasis. That means to kind of make something stand out a little more. Here's an example. The boy buzzed like a busy bee. We'll notice that the B sound here, boy, buzz, busy bee. Okay, kind of like a tongue twister, right? Sally sold seashells. Things that repeat, okay? Those sounds and letters that repeat over and over and over, okay? To emphasize or make something stand out. So when you're reading When the Giant Stirred, I want you to see, and you can always come back to this video now, because now you know what a simile is, you know what personification is, you know what alliteration is, you know what onomatopoeia is. So now when you're reading, you can go back and you can list any of these types of figurative language that you see. So we're going to do one together, and then I want you to look for one on your own. So let's do that. So we're going to go to this page together. I think this is page 360, and we're going to answer together. And then you're going to try one on your own. So here I pulled out this section and it says here, over all of this peaceful island towered a great cone-shaped mountain. So we're on an island here and there's a mountain. I know a mountain is not alive. Okay, that we know. Most of the time it was quiet. Okay, now can a mountain, okay, we know that around the island is quiet, but sometimes it let out a puff of smoke. Okay, like a volcano, right? Or rumbled like a giant mumbling in his sleep. Okay, so the question says, what is the simile on this page? Number 2, is the mountain really a giant? So we know what a giant is, right? We've heard stories about giants. We know that they don't really exist. Okay, but they're talking about a giant mountain, a large mountain, right? And it said sometimes, most of the time it was quiet, but occasionally it let out a puff of smoke or it rumbled like a giant, mumbling, making little sounds in his sleep. Now it says here, I see the word like. So if I go back to our simile, a simile makes a comparison using the words like or as. And what we did here, Pikachu is like the sun. So we compared Pikachu and the sun. So if we go back to here, the two things that are being compared are the mountain and a giant in his sleep using the word like. Okay, so it's saying the mountain is usually quiet, but sometimes it's like a big giant in his sleep because it says the word like, and it's comparing it to a giant. So let's jot that down. The simile is the mountain being compared to a sleeping giant mumbling in his sleep because it is mostly quiet, but sometimes makes some noise. Okay? And then finally, is the mountain really a giant? Well, I think we can answer that together. Is the mountain really a giant? No. The mountain is not a giant. It is just being compared to one because it is large, right? So that we know it is figurative and it's giving us as the reader something more interesting to think about, okay? And then what I want you to do on your own, so now that we have the simile there, right? So we had mountain and sleeping giant. Okay, now what I want you to do on your own, pages 373 and on, I want you to go to 373 of when the giant stirred, and I want you to think about why might the author have chosen the phrase in its fury in paragraph 21, and why might the author have decided to use alliteration? Okay, so I'm helping you out here by showing you what figurative language is there, and you're going to pause and think about that and go back on your own. And where every time you see those blue boxes and your other slide, you're going to type in those boxes there. I know that there's other slides that you're typing in. So hopefully this video helped you and you did a great job. And you can always come back to this if you need help.